Krystal, what are your breaking points today?
Well, as you all know, I'm a strong believer in ending the war on drugs. Prohibition has done nothing but immiserate millions, empower murderous criminals, and destabilize an entire section of the globe. Even the goal it's supposed to achieve of reducing addiction and overdose death has been a dramatic failure. We have been interdicting heroin and trying to cut off the supply of a myriad of drugs for 100 years. Yet, last year was the worst in history for overdose deaths. Clearly, our long-standing approach is a complete failure. Yet my friend Sagar and others raise a concern about drug legalization that I actually think is really legitimate. What is the end result going to be when legal weed and other substances get in the hands of big pharma, big tobacco, and other corporate actors who are chomping at the bit to profit off of substance use and abuse? After all, these corporate actors, they've got no incentive to foster a moderate, responsible culture around drug use. The more desperate and addicted people become, the more money those bad actors stand to make. And the truth is, we already know what this looks like. Purdue Pharma, owned by the Sackler family, they pushed Oxy on the nation, concocting an entire well-funded and organized scheme to addict users and push their pills on people who did not want or need them. When those prescriptions ran out, users often turned to street heroin or worse, fentanyl, in an unregulated market with nefarious actors and no help when a habit turned into a disaster. Now, this future is frankly of little risk with weed because it's not particularly addictive, but legalization efforts underway now as we move away from a war on drugs mentality, hopefully, are a chance to blaze the trail for what future drug legalization efforts might look like. Do we want to blaze that trail to another hellscape of endless capitalist exploitation, or might there be another way? A chance to demonstrate an alternative way of thinking about markets and about workplaces. Now, a lot of states seem to at least pay lip service to righting the wrongs of decades of mass incarceration that have criminalized poverty and blackness, have included equity provisions in their marijuana legalization laws. Generally, these are written so as to encourage black business ownership. But anyone who understands the limits of identity politics alone can see the limitations in this approach. It is still unmitigated American-style, late-stage capitalism, even if you do successfully get some diverse ownership into the mix. But as we speak, the state of Rhode Island is considering a far more revolutionary approach. According to The Intercept, Rhode Island's Yes We Cannabis Coalition is pushing a legalization bill that would include those equity provisions similar to those present in New York State's legalization, but they would add in a push for workplace democracy that could actually be a real game changer. So the provisions they're pushing would address concerns from organized labor, that marijuana workers be able to organize. But even more significant here, they would prioritize marijuana licenses for worker-owned co-ops so that workers themselves would be in position to profit from this new market. That would be truly groundbreaking. So co-ops, they barely have a toehold in the rapacious capital markets of America. But there are some signs that increasing dissatisfaction with our current profit above everything approach is leading to more experimentation with workplace democracy and worker ownership. So in New York, workers recently launched a new Uber-style ride-sharing app under a co-op model and had thousands of drivers sign up to participate. Co-op Ride gives all of its drivers a vote in company decision-making and a share of the company profits. After a 15% commission to cover operating expenses, the rest of the profits are shared with the drivers. One of the drivers who's involved in the effort explained that he's just looking for a fair deal and a reflection of the thousands of dollars in costs that drivers incur in wear and tear on their vehicles. Drivers' lives are, quote, in the hands of Uber and Lyft, Michael Guwu told Gizmodo. This is our time to make money for our own selves instead of enriching those giant companies. We made them giant, by the way. Drivers invested their money in big cars, $80,000 or $90,000 just to drive for them, and they don't care. A recent documentary by Jaisal Noor of the Real News Network documented the success of co-ops during coronavirus.
Workers rarely get an adequate share of the wealth their labor creates. In 2020, the median salary at Amazon was under $30,000, while its founder, Jeff Bezos, made hundreds of times that, over $13 million, every hour. While seemingly ignoring how these issues may be connected, some have decried a shortage of people who want to work in frontline and service sectors. But a growing movement is putting this narrative on its head.
We work as well as own this company, and we designed it to what would work for us, what would make it not feel like a job when we come into this environment, what makes it feel like more of just being around your friends and getting a job done versus actually being at a job with somebody ruling and watching over you.
Under the radar, the small but growing sector of worker-run co-ops, part of the larger cooperative ecosystem, is demonstrating that you don't need bosses. Workers can be successful if granted the necessary power and resources.
Now, the link to that full doc is in the description, so make sure to check out the great work Max Alvarez and Noor and others are doing over there at the Real News Network. Now, Rhode Island, if they adopt a co-op approach to weed legalization, it will represent a very small step towards a different way of doing business and really a different set of values than the ones that have dominated America for decades. A co-op sector in Rhode Island could compete against the traditional capital sector, and we could all see what the results are in real time. This type of small step leading to large changes is far from unprecedented. A law in Italy actually provides unemployed workers with capital to start co-ops, and that has led to a huge concentration of worker-owned co-ops in that country, in particular in the Emilia-Romagna region of that country. 30% of the businesses in that region are worker-owned co-ops. It also happens to be one of the most prosperous areas in Italy, and they weathered the 2008 financial crisis better than anywhere else in that country. None of that happened by accident, of course. The Italian government has support for co-ops in their constitution, and they've set up a number of institutions and incentives to help these worker-owned businesses be able to compete. In Rhode Island, there's a small sliver of a chance to try something similar in the marijuana market and see what happens. At a time when, as we've documented here, workers across the board are reassessing and shifting their habits, looking for meaning, looking for control. This type of thinking and policy push is exactly the direction that we should be heading in. If we are opening up new markets, why not run those markets in a new way? And Sagar, this is one of the things that you've challenged me on that